herbs.
Sorry.
The study of yoga, nidra, mindfulness-centered somatic psychotherapy came a year later. She has been a yoga therapist for 12 years, teaching movement, breathing, pranayama, mantra, meditation, and yoga nidra for the healing of mental, spiritual, and physical conditions. As an Ayurveda practitioner, her discipline offers holistic assessment of mental and physical state with comprehensive therapeutic lifestyle plan. So she is very talented director who's doing so much work on the community level in helping manage AAC admin and so many activities that we do it together. So I won't take more time and ask Erica to give a summary of her topic that she's going to discuss today, and then she'll do the actual presentation. So Erica, please go ahead.
Thank you, Neelam. That was a wonderful introduction. My name is Erica Mueller. I live in Kelowna, British Columbia in Canada. And I'm really passionate about the nonprofit work that we do at the Ayurvedic Association of Canada. I believe that Ayurveda is going to be the next most powerful natural healing science. And we are at the forefront of that. And so to join us and become part of the community in Canada will be a very, very powerful experience as the years go by. Ayurveda today is like yoga was 22 years ago when I opened my first yoga studio, when in Kelowna, hardly anyone knew about yoga. So join us as a member, become involved as a volunteer if you'd like to. And hopefully when COVID is over, we'll be able to have our first conference in a couple of years in the fall. So I'm really passionate about women's health. I feel that it is not neglected, but looked at in a very different perspective in the allopathic world, or even in the, if you go to a health food store. And Ayurveda has a vast understanding of women's health. If you look at the ancient texts that I study from, there's huge sections of it just developed for all the different stages of women's health. And obviously this evening, I'm only going to be able to give you an overview of the Ayurvedic perspective of women's health. And at the end, you'll be able to ask a few questions. So before I start, there's just a piece that I feel is really important. That's really important in understanding Ayurveda. Because of the advent of the internet and everything that's going on today, on the internet, Ayurveda is getting very generalized. So, there's kind of this herb for this condition and this kind of a protocol, and it's all very good information. It's very good general information for the general population to start to begin to understand Ayurveda. But the one thing that I've really learned over the last 6 years of having a clinical practice is that all of us are truly individuals, and Ayurveda states that. But when someone comes to my practice, they really begin to understand how their situations are individual, even within the same dosha, within the same condition category. So every single condition in Ayurveda can have a basis in any of the doshas, in any of the dhatus. Even though lots of times online we'll see that, this is what happens to Vata dosha, or this is what happens to Pitta. And there are some commonalities for sure, but when we start dealing with any kind of conditions of the digestive system or the mind, or any kind of what they call in North America diseases, it's very important to get a clinical diagnosis of what's going on, because it can be so varied from what you actually think it is on the internet. So I'll start with my presentation on women's health. Sometimes I think in North America, women believe that women get a bad rap in Ayurveda. You know, they're from a sexuality point of view, there's kind of rules that we hear about, you know, how women are treated. But when you read the ancient texts and you really dive into what people are talking about, you know, like not staying away from women during menstrual flows and different pieces, there's a very logical, natural flow of why that happens, and a very energetic flow of why that happens. But truly in Ayurveda, women are revered. They are the prakriti, or the representation of all of nature. And so from that point of view, we have a very powerful job and a very powerful being in this world today, to be able to carry that true representation of nature around our own communities, around our own country, and hopefully we will spread it and around the world. So the really interesting thing about women is that because of the natural regulation of our cycles, we do a natural cleansing and a natural purging every month. And men are not quite so lucky. They don't have that advantage that we have to be able to cleanse and purge. And the other piece of us is that we are very soft, very mature, which means that we have the ability to transform much more effectively than men do. And we need to have that ability because we go through some very major transformations over the course of our life that men don't go through in the same way. So this statement from the Samhita at the bottom of the page in Ayurveda is the definition of health. And it's in Sanskrit, and you don't need to understand Sanskrit, but I always like to explain this to anyone that comes and sits in front of me, because in health in Ayurveda, we have to have balanced doshas, we have to have balanced agnis, balanced fires in our body, and it's not just in our digestive system. We need to have balanced dhatus. All the tissues in our system need to be balanced, and the shukra dhatu, which is the reproductive system, is the last system and the most important system before ojas that needs to be balanced. We also need to have balanced malas. Malas are secretions or excrements. So it's sweat and urine and feces, but they have a very important role in Ayurveda. You know, in North America, we may not feel that they have quite so important a role, but in Ayurveda, they do. And we also need to have balanced senses, because in Ayurveda, food is not just what we put in our mouth. Food is what we eat, what we breathe in, what we drink, water, and what we bring in from all our senses. So we need to have balanced senses to have true health in Ayurveda, and we need to have a healthy, happy mind. So to look at all those different components is very important for a woman to understand how to be healthy and how to stay healthy. So in terms of a general understanding of women's health, according to Ayurveda, in Ayurveda, we say there are 3 major cycles that a woman goes through in her life. The first one is childhood, and the second one is your fertile years and your years of pregnancy. And then we move from being fertile to not being fertile. In North America, sometimes we see what we call being fertile to non-fertile as menopause, and many times it's people kind of feel that it's a form of a disease. But in Ayurveda, it's just a natural warning from nature, because in Ayurveda, everything is based on the natural world. So it's a warning from nature that it is no longer time for us to be able to bear a child. And I think that's a very beautiful cycle that we have. Now, the most of the health conditions that I see today are either from menopause or from infertility. But every single section of the cycles of a women's life have very specific protocols, very specific panchakarmas, and specific eating programs designed within our prakriti, within our birth constitution. And so it's important for us to honor all of those different phases and how those phases work with who we are, what our prakriti is, and where our imbalances are. In Ayurveda, we talk about a normal menstrual cycle. And that means we have a healthy uterine system, and we have healthy, what we call apanavayu. In Ayurveda, apanavayu is the downward flow of vata. So apanavayu allows for menstruation and childbirth and bowel movements and urine and orgasms. Everything in that area of the body has to do with apanavayu. So when we look at women's health issues today in Ayurveda, we must include vata in the diagnosis of what's going on in a woman's health issue. So what are the roles of doshas in the endocrine system? Well, the doshas play out a little bit different in all of our endocrine health, because the endocrine system is both a chemical system and an electrical system, a nerve system. And it's very important for us as women to understand the impact that stress and the kind of things that we now are expected to do in our society that we were never expected to do before, how it influences our whole endocrine system and the production of the thyroid, which influences the production of estrogen, which influences the whole uterine system. And so in Ayurveda, the whole endocrine system is an Agni system and an Ojas system, which means that it's based on transformation. And the Ojas part of it is the part about vitality and immunity in the body. And I'll talk a little bit more about it a little bit later. So when you look at the reproductive system in Ayurveda, there's a dhatu, which is a tissue. It's the last tissue. It's called Shukra dhatu. And it's the last tissue in the line of nourishment when we're taking in food and nourishing all the systems in the body. In the classical text, there's some differentiation between how long it takes the food that we eat to reach the Shukra dhatu, but most commonly it's 30 days. And so when we look at what we're eating today, some of it is utilized very quickly in the body, but for it to reach what we call the Shukra dhatu can take up to 30 days. So the health of the whole uterine system and the whole reproductive system is a long-term program of keeping yourself healthy. And so to live Ayurvedically would keep your whole system balanced and to keep your whole digestive system balanced. Now, incorporated with the Shukra dhatu is the Stanya Vahastrota, which is the breast tissue, and the Artava Vahastrota, which is the whole menstrual flow. And that's how we differentiate when we are when we're helping people to understand what's going on in their body and the reproductive system, how we can divide it up. Because one really important thing to remember about your reproductive system and the stanya and the breast tissue and the artava and your menstrual flow is that it is directly correlated to the first tissue in the body, which is called the rasa dhatu. So if your digestion is not working properly, or you are not following the rules of the eating protocols and the principles around the foods you should be eating, you will affect the very first tissue of the body and the second tissue, which are rasa and rakta. And when you affect rasa dhatu and you're eating too heavy of foods, or you're cleansing into eating too light of foods, you have a direct impact on breast milk. So today we see that often where people want to lose weight after they have had a child and they don't have any breast milk. And that's because they're not feeding their rasa dhatu enough to be able to produce enough breast milk. And it's a very good indicator in your health what your menstrual flow is like. Because if you have a scant menstrual flow and you are reading about that online, it'll usually say that it has something to do with vata. And it can definitely have something to do with the vata dosha. But we also need to consider that the things that imbalance vata, like really light eating, cleansing, green salads all the time, over exercising, will directly influence your menstrual flow. And influencing your menstrual flow is the first piece of being able to create all kinds of other issues like PMS, endometriosis. All kinds of issues come from that dysregulation of your menstrual flow. So be very mindful of how you're eating and how your digestion is working to be able to keep that reproductive system healthy. Oh, I spoke about that already. So understanding the 7 tissues and the doshas that's just that flow that I was talking about of rasa and rakta, and how it flows through all the other tissues in the body till it gets to the 7th tissue, and then it nourishes the shukra dhatu. And another very important thing about the reproductive system is the reproductive system is the end piece that nourishes what we call ojas in the body. So that's our vitality, our immunity, and even our sexual vitality all has to do with how we produce ojas in the body. And there's different types of ojas, and that's not a discussion for this evening. So as you can see in the bottom of the page, as I was saying earlier, that the menstrual flow will lead into all different other kinds of conditions and diseases in Ayurveda. It's the same with every single disease in Ayurveda. It all starts in the digestive system or the mental and physical digestion and works through different kinds of patterns that lead to disease. It's not like we just create disease. So even PMS can be is a product of not living your life properly within your doshic makeup. So what are some general management profiles that we use in Ayurveda? Well, if you've been involved in Ayurveda in your life, you do know that the proper diet and lifestyle for your property is very important for you. And that means the proper lifestyle protocols are not just what you're eating today or how you're sleeping today, but how you're living in rhythm with the seasons of life. So there's dinacharya, there's daily rhythms which follow the sun and the moon. There's ritacharya, which are seasonal kinds of rhythms. And then there's rhythms that are specifically designed for the whole menstrual cycle of women because we are very special. And so if you look at the list below, it's kind of an expression of what we need to look at in terms of taking care of ourselves. So ahara is food, vihara is lifestyle practices. And in those lifestyle practices, we need to learn about exercise from a women's perspective, because many women now over-exercise. And they're exercising when they're having their menstrual cycles. And in Ayurveda, that is not a nourishing way to look after yourself. So, in Ayurveda, we need to balance everything. Or our sleep cycles influence that whole hypothalamus pituitary rhythm that influences our ovaries and influences the hormones, the sexual hormones in the body. And so if we're not getting proper sleep patterns, there's all kinds of sleep hygiene that Ayurveda uses. It don't take any kinds of herbs or anything except learning the proper rhythm for your evening protocols so that you are setting yourself up for a good night's sleep. And we tend to get into a busy world and we forget to some of these most simple things that are definitely the most profound things you can do as a woman to keep yourself healthy and young, because we never need to, we need to age, our skin's going to wrinkle and things are going to happen, but we do not need to ever lose our vitality or have osteoporosis or any of those kinds of conditions if we start following some of these flows. And stress is a huge piece in all of those kind of things that we do in our daily life. I've had many clients who have hot flashes, and when we start to slow down their life and I get them to realize themselves, because I believe that my clients are the healer, not me. When I get them to see how stress impacts their life, and they just change their life for a month and their hot flashes go away, and they haven't had to take all the herbs that they've been taking from the health food store, it's a very profound aha for all of us, how our nervous system and our mind affect all those pieces that we think we need to, buy things for, when really it's very important for us to live properly. And excess cleansing is another thing that we are famous for in North America. Cleansing is depleting. It's vata aggravating. And, when I talk to many people, they are cleansing in some way all the time. There's a rhythm of cleansing in Ayurveda and a process called panchakarma that we use to be able to cleanse the body. Or we only cleanse at very specific times of the year, like the spring. We cleanse out the kapha from the body in the wintertime. And so if you are cleansing all the time and never rejuvenating, you are definitely going to affect the whole reproductive system in your body. And pranayama is also another really nice and wonderful piece to add into your life. Just a general nadi shodhana every day, helps with stress management in your life. If you've got a very pitta aggravating condition, then, more cooling breaths can be used. But that's part of why it's very helpful for you to go to someone who has a clinical practice and allow them to at least start the process for you of understanding how you can put together a protocol and foods and a lifestyle to be able to optimize not just your reproductive system, but your entire being. The hormonal changes have a huge influence from the nervous system and the digestive system. And that's like a whole huge topic on its own, but just realize that how your digestive system is working, it will affect how your hormones are functioning in the body, because the hormones, whether they're metabolic hormones or whether they're sexual hormones or whether they're energy hormones, they're all based on Agni. And if our Agni is not working properly and we're creating what we call ama, which is uncooked, it is the word what the word ama means. If we have uncooked foods or uncooked emotions, we are going to have an effect on the hormonal system in the body. So that's the big piece of the mind. The mind is the whole other piece of balancing out the reproductive system. I've been trained by Dr. J that if you're looking at infertility in women, one of the huge number one and number two factors that you need to look at are digestion and how the mind is functioning. If I go back to that first slide about the definition of health in Ayurveda, a healthy, happy mind is an important piece. So in Ayurveda and infertility, we look at the sperm and the ovum and the condition of the womb, the healthiness of the womb for a child to grow. But there's a fourth piece that is not looked at in North America, and that is the healthiness and the happiness of the mind. And sometimes, as I've learned from Dr. J, it's the one piece, everything else is working, and it's the one piece that needs to be addressed. So women's stages of life, as I said, we have three major stages, and then we can kind of categorize it a little bit, because depending on the stage of your life, you are also in a different dosha. So it doesn't matter what your prakriti is, your doshic makeup. I mean, it does matter, but in terms of your doshic makeup, sometimes we have to address it in conjunction with how old you are. So if you look at the screen here, Bala is 0 to 10, Kumari is 10 to 12. And then just at the end of the Kumari stage is when menarche usually starts. What's happened in North America now is we see young girls starting to get their menstrual flow at 9 years old. And we also see them starting to be put on hormonal protocols to deal with that. Because for some reason in North America, we believe that that's going to be the answer. It's like birth control became a very prominent way to not get pregnant. And it's a great way to not get pregnant. But it does, just to let you know, long term, if you are a young woman and you are on birth control for a long period of your life, it will definitely affect weight gain at the end of your life, whether you can get pregnant, lots of different issues. Because the body was never made not to have a menstrual flow. And where we ever came to think that that was a natural thing for us to happen, I don't know. but it did happen. So we're manipulating nature, and in Ayurveda, anytime you manipulate nature, you are going to have a problem because nature will always win. Nature's been around forever. It has what they call circadian rhythms. It has flows that we need to pay attention to. And in ancient times, it was a very sacred time when women were menstruating. And, women got together and were more creative, were more intuitive. We don't tend to do those kinds of things anymore, right? We just still go to work and keep doing everything that we do. And then menopause is the next stage. And menopause is not a disease. Menopause is a natural flow into a more creative, intuitive, wise period as a woman. And I meet too many women that don't believe that that's what's happening for them, that they're not moving into that creative, wise, intuitive period in their life. And part of the reason they're not believing that is because they have so many symptoms moving into menopause, just like women are having so many symptoms moving through PMS. And if you build yourself a balanced life, you should go through menopause very easily, and you should be able to mitigate most of the PMS symptoms and other conditions that that you can get from the reproductive system not working properly. Now, if you're already in an imbalanced state, it's going to take a little bit more time for the whole reproductive system to start to function properly. And just one interesting fact that Dr. J always talks about, he's my hero. He's my #1 teacher for 9 years now. He talks about how we manipulated nature, even with grapes. Now we have seedless grapes. And what he will say is that the seeds in the grape help with fertility. So if we're going to take the seeds out of grapes, how are we going to affect fertility? And how many other places have we manipulated nature in those ways? And we've already manipulated nature in milk. In Ayurveda, we like milk. Most people, are lactose intolerant or have all these issues, but it may be the problem of the milk that we're drinking, because in Ayurveda, we need full fat milk. It needs to be heated, it needs to be spiced, and it needs to have a very specific purpose in your life. So just like everything in Ayurveda, all foods, they have a purpose, and the way they're spiced and they're cooked will affect what's happening. And it's just a whole new transition that I would like you to look at, because many people in North America that I've met in my practice don't look at food like that. They think kale is good, or bread is bad, or they kind of very reductionistic in their understanding, when it has more to do with the properties of the food, the spices we put into it, and what our constitution is. And that works throughout the entire body, and especially into the reproductive system. So your menstrual flow and the doshas. As you can see, people's faces and bodies look a little bit different. And if you are doing a Vikriti or Prakriti assessment online, please do not consider weight as a #1 category, because I have so many people that come to me that tell me they're Vata because they're heavy, and they're not, or they're Kapha because they're heavy, but that's not a predominant feature of understanding what your Prakriti is. It's probably a better understanding of what the Vikriti is, where the imbalances are. So if we look at the menstrual flow per dosha, Vata people, just from the nature of who they are and the nature of their qualities, they tend to be irregular. They tend to be thin and scant. So that's what happens with the menstrual flow. And the menstrual flows are a little bit shorter. But to be honest with you, even though they can be less regular and be a little bit more scant, they can still be healthy. That does not, those criteria or those ways of looking at Vata menstrual flow does not mean that it has to be an unhealthy menstrual flow. It can be if you're irregular and brown and scant, and you're cleansing all the time and you're crampy all the time. It's definitely an Apanavayu issue, and you've got a dysregulation in the Vata system in the body. So some really easy ways to deal with that are warm, sweet, unctuous, which is oily, food. So we put those oils on our body. You know, that's part of dinacharya. We oil our bodies all day, most days or all days, unless you have congestion issues, and then it's probably not a great idea to be oiling your body all the time or your head all the time. But as you can see, ghee is a wonderful product for both pitta and vata, because most conditions in Ayurveda from a clinical perspective are not single doshas. There are at least usually two doshas involved in any kind of a clinical condition that you would come to a practitioner for. And that Dhanvantaram Thailam, Neelam has it. It's a great product for Vata people. And then if you look at pitta, you can see sour and pungent. So an interesting thing about pitta people is that their sweat and their menstrual flow can be more sour and pungent. It's usually a darker red color because pitta is very associated with Rakta Dhatu, and they become more irritable. They have a different kind of pain. You know, we tend to sometimes think that pain's only associated with Vata, but it's associated with all the doshas. It's just that pitta pain is sharper and more intense than a Vata type of pain. They tend to have hunger pains and their periods are a little bit longer. So a major piece in all lifestyle choices and food choices is to decrease sour, salty, and pungent. So that's in your foods. It's also in your life. So if you think about sour emotions, or you think about pungent or hot things like hot showers and wine and pieces like that, those are all pieces that will affect how the menstrual flow is influenced on a monthly basis. And so you're looking for more cooling and sweet products. And you don't have to be an Ayurvedic practitioner or go and spend hours online or hours in a book understanding cool and sweet. Just use your natural intuition. You have it inside of yourself. Just trust yourself a little bit more to start to understand what cool and sweet is. And so if you look at some of the herbs you can use, chandra, which is sandalwood, neem, patoli, yadimashtu, which is licorice. They're all very good for the pitta dosha. Kapha dosha tend to be slower and stickier and heavier. They tend to have heavier breasts and maybe some lumpiness in their breasts. And they get abdominal bloating and edema many times because the kapha is more earth and water. And so those elements show up when we start to get our menstrual flow. So we need to just be able to mitigate that by eating lighter diets or doing a little bit more mobile activity without being excessive, and using bitter and astringent kinds of products to be able to do that. Vata Kapha people are the least likely to need oiling treatments on a regular basis because they tend to congest very easily. So the 3 stages of the pitta stage of life, or your pre-pregnancy. So that's all about understanding fertility and ovulation and how astrology fits into it, and the use of panchakarma. So if you are thinking about getting pregnant and you are a part of an Ayurvedic world, there's usually a panchakarma done both for the husband and the wife to set up the bodies for the perfect ovulation cycle and the perfect impregnancy. So fertility has a lot to do with what you've been doing years ahead, or if you're having problems with fertility issues, many times we can go to Dr. Jada's specialized panchakarma for fertility and can set up the protocol. And he's taught me a lot of those protocols on fertility. And then when we move from pre-pregnancy into pregnancy, it's a whole other stage, another transformation of the woman's body. We are just so supple and so able to transform. It just should be a joy for all of us to understand how powerful we are in terms of our transformation. In pregnancy in Ayurveda, there's specific foods that are eaten every month in specific orders to help with the building of the child. There's special treatments that are done on the stomach and on the breast to be able to help the woman move through pregnancy. And also there's some really interesting flows in Ayurveda that they pay attention to. And one of them is the flow of ojas between the mother and the child. So the ojas flows from the mother to the child and the child to the mother on an irregular kind of basis throughout pregnancy. And one of the really prime times that we need to be careful with is the 8th month. And then after the birth of the child in traditional Ayurvedic texts, the woman would have help from her family, usually in India. But from here we don't tend to do that very much. We tend to take a couple of weeks off usually, and then many of us go back to work. And that's just not enough time for us to be able to rejuvenate the body the way we need to. And it's important for all of us to work and earn an income and all that, all those pieces. But we also need to realize that we have to live with our body for the rest of our lives. And that to be able to create a healthy environment, to be able to move forward for your child and for your family, and to be able to go back to work may take a few more weeks, but it's a very important process. And so we just need to change our mental thinking a little bit about the long-term and the short-term goals. And then breast milk is dealt with in terms of using certain kinds of herbs, and how the baby is massaged, and how the stomach is wrapped, and how the stomach is massaged. There's a whole protocol involved in that postpartum care. So then we can look at perimenopause, kind of the next phase. Many people have perimenopausal symptoms very early now. And when you look at some of the changes that happen, that you can see there, the period changes, hot flashes, night sweat, mood changes, vaginal dryness, sleeping problems, and weight changes, they are very predominant in the perimenopausal phase. Now, if you're going through some of those issues and you've been tested, or you believe you're going through perimenopause, it's great to start an introduction of an Ayurvedic or Vedic lifestyle and food protocols to help you mitigate and even actually get rid of all those symptoms, because it's not common knowledge in our Ayurvedic texts that you need to have any symptoms going through perimenopause or menopause. That's just something that our society today, that's happened because of how we live our lives and how far we have become disconnected from nature. And then menopause. So menopause can happen at different periods in life. Usually in Ayurveda, it happens somewhere between 55 and 60 years of age. And menopause will also be predisposed by when you first started your menarche. So there's something really interesting in Ayurveda, that if you started your period, your menarche, very early in your life, that you will have more likelihood of having issues like osteoporosis. So there is this natural flow that nature has made for us, and we can't always control that. But even with our children, we can start to slow things down for them, and be more careful about watching their foods and what kind of herbs they're having, especially us young women at an early age. So we can have early menopause, and early menopause can come from chemotherapy. And when you can get your period back after the chemotherapy and what they call early menopause by doing very specific treatments in Ayurveda. You can also go into early menopause by too many vata-provoking things, over-exercising, cleansing all the time, eating salads all the time. It's just such a common thing I see for people that come to see me, is that they're eating salads and raw foods because they think that that's the most healthy thing to eat. Now, in Ayurveda, there's a balance. There isn't one food that's the most healthy to eat. There's a balance based on your vikritis, where your imbalances are and what your prakritis are. But we actually do like cooked, unctuous foods because they're easy to digest and they're easy for the body to assimilate. And that's not saying that we should never eat salads. There's seasonal things that we do. Everything's starting to grow now, and we need to look to our natural environment. But the problem is you see people eating salads in the middle of the wintertime and all winter long, and cleansing all winter long, and over exercising all winter long. And those are very vata provoking, and very vata provoking for the apana vayu, that downward movement that I was talking about earlier. And apana vayu is the major regulator of all the vayus in your body. So you need to take special care of it. So, find a balanced diet, find a balanced way of exercising, find a balanced way of sleeping, not over, not under. And all those things will allow you to keep your vata in balance, and will help you stay healthier and not run into those symptoms of early menopause. And as I said, menopause is not a disease. It's a transition, another transformation for us wonderful women. It's another transformation. And if there's men on the call, I'm not excluding you. I'm sorry. It's a wonderful transition into that more contemplative, expansive piece of life. We've done our job. We've brought up our children. We've done all the pieces that our womb and that Mother Nature has wanted us to do. And now it's time for us to be able to move into a different phase and be wise for everyone in our lives. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about premenstrual cycle. I'm not going to talk about all the different conditions. There's too many of them, and there's so much information in terms of understanding all of them. But premenstrual syndrome is quite common, PMS. And in fact, we actually think it's okay, that we just have to endure it. And sometimes we have to endure some of the symptoms, but we definitely, through the proper Ayurvedic lifestyle, do not have to have all the major symptoms that I see women having with PMS. So as you can see, the more predominant symptoms, if you are more vata predominant, is pain, sleeplessness, oversensitivity, cramping, constipation, and pittas, acne, irritation, mood swings, cravings for salt, diarrhea, kapha's weight gain, breast tenderness. Now, the interesting thing that you can see here is that if you think about yourself, you're not probably just predominantly in one of those categories, which means that there are probably two doshas that need to be addressed when you're looking at premenstrual syndromes. And so that's kind of a little bit more tricky piece to understand how to use the right oiliness and the right dryness in the balancing of the food and lifestyle protocols to be able to get rid of PMS. But it can be done. So healthy self-care. I think we've kind of talked about this in terms of, making sure you rest properly. And so what is rest? I mean, most of us, or many of us, or many people in North America, maybe not many of us because we are interested in Ayurveda, but many people think rest is playing on their phone or watching TV. That is definitely not rest. The mind is still active. The nervous system is still active. And we tend to have a propensity today of a very overactive mind and nervous system. So I always tell my clients that we tend to live above the clavicles, right? Everything is going on up here. Even though we understand mind-body connection, which is a huge piece of what I do in terms of my yoga therapy. And yoga therapy is not about yoga asanas. It's about meditation and mindfulness and breathing, pranayama, and all those kinds of pieces, because there's specific types of breathing and meditation for different types of doshas and different types of conditions. So when you're thinking about resting is more about going for a walk in nature, going for a walk in the moonlight. Very good for pitta people to go for a walk in the moonlight. So just start to examine how often you need to be on your phone or on a TV or on your computer and doing something that you like, watching a movie or something, which is wonderful. I'm not saying it's not wonderful, but it's not the type of rest we need. We need to do body scans. We need to do yoga nidra to get back in touch with who we are. That's a very important thing that we're missing in North America today, is getting back in touch with who we are and understanding our digestive system and our bowel movements and our menstrual cycles and how our heart beats and all of those pieces. And then I've already talked about sleep and exercise. And When you're on your menstrual flow, it's very good to eat light foods. It's a cleansing time for you. So just lighten up your diet a little bit. Don't drink any alcohol. Don't have any coffee. And start to see after a few months of getting yourself into those cycles of eating lighter foods during your menstrual cycle, what happens if your PMS decreases. And it may not. I don't have that answer for you because Ayurveda is such an individual practice. We are all, even with the same doshas, we are all completely unique individuals having a very unique experience on this earth and having our own karma, our own path that we need to take. But they're great things to start playing with and starting to see how they affect your body, your mind, and your spirit. Because the last piece that's really important in Ayurveda is that we believe in a spirit. We believe there's something in us that is never changing, that will always be there. And we just need to get in touch with it. So I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes on a few different herbs that you can use in Ayurveda. And, you know, the way I've been taught is that there's no herb that does this all the time. We're just a little bit too used to that, you know, that I can take this herb and it's going to do this for me. But you know, I've been trained in a very different classical way, and every herb has its advantages and its disadvantages depending on the outcome you're looking for, and which dosha you're influencing, and which guna or which quality in the body you're influencing. So we're just going to talk about, I think 4 different herbs are in this slide. And you know, I've already talked about right food and right lifestyle. There's all kinds of preparations we do. We all do all kinds of vastis, which in North America, I call them enemas just so people can understand them, but they are not an enema at all. And we do them vaginally and rectally, and have all different decoctions and oils that we use to have very specific outcomes. One of the very specific outcomes for vastis is to improve bone health through the rectum, which is kind of odd when people first come to see me and get an understanding of that. So in the slides that you're going to see the words rasa, virya, vipaka, and prabhava. And I have one other one called guna that aren't on these slides, but I'll explain a little bit about that. So rasa is a taste of food, the first taste you have when you put it on your tongue. The virya has to do with the heating or cooling or drying or moistening properties of a food, a herb. Vipaka has to do with the post-digestive effect, which means that after digestion, what does that herb do in the body? Because it could be very different from the rasa and the virya. And prabhava is a really interesting concept. I think it's unique to Ayurveda, which means that the herb can have very specific properties in the body that go against the principles that you know. So sometimes you can have a herb like dry ginger, which has a heating quality, but its end product, its vipaka in the body is called sweet. And so it's very good. Dry ginger is very good for the reproductive system because of the vipaka, even though it's heating, and it can be heating for a pitta person. But that's a very complicated thing. All I want you to know is that we categorize things in Ayurveda to be able to understand how we can best serve our clients with the herbs or the formulas or the oils or whatever we're using. And also, just on a side note, before I go on to the 4 herbs, is that if you understand the effect of plastics, xenoestrogens in the world today, be very careful with them as a woman. So, you know, we know, don't cook in the microwave with plastic, or try not to use plastic bags, and don't put your food in plastic bags when you go to the grocery store. But there's some very more subtle ways that xenoestrogens enter the body. Like if you're opening a bag, I'll use potato chips, even though, you know, they're not good to eat, but you know, that you open that bag, or you open you bought something at Best Buy and it's got plastic and you're opening it up. When you inhale that, you're inhaling xenoestrogens in the body, and you're affecting the whole metabolic function of your system. Because, even though most people believe that there's many people in this world that are in North America that are estrogen dominant, the way I've been taught, that is not the number one reason for the problems with estrogen in the body. It's because we're not balanced. And we need to have, with everything in Ayurveda, we need to learn how to balance all those systems and all those hormones, be they metabolic or sexual or energetic hormones. So we'll talk a little bit about Shadowvaria. So Shadowvaria is quite a well-known herb in Ayurveda, and I see it in lots of health food stores now for the reproductive system. So it's sweet and astringent, it's cooling, so it's usually very good for pitta because it's cooling. And it's vipaka is sweet, and sweet is something that pitta people need. So, and I'm not talking about cake or cookies, but so that sweet guna, that sweet quality has very specific effect on the pitta constitution, which means it will have a very specific effect on the reproductive system and how the hormones flow. So you can see that it can be an estrogen precursor. Now, I'm not taught that way. I'm not taught as the word estrogen. It's bala. It's what you can see there's anabolic, but bala means that it builds things. So it can be very good for pitta people, and it can be very good for vata people, and it can be very good for that balance of the pitta and the vata. So it tones the uterus. And lots of times it can help with white discharge, because white discharge usually in Ayurveda is not a kapha condition. It's usually a vata condition. And it can help regulate your menstrual flow. And it's a very nice herb to be able to decoct or add it to milk and water, and to be able to use it in a more effective way to get more potency out of it. Ashoka, that's in the way I was learned, that's called a divine herb. It's divine for women and divine for their reproductive systems. So as you can see, it's sweet and astringent, it has certain properties. It's more heating, so overuse of it can have an effect on the pitta dosha for sure. And it's pungent, which also means hot. So it's more catabolic, which means it's more breaking down than it is anabolic, building in the body. And again, it will balance out the hormones in very specific ways. And as with everything, there's certain roots and flowers and different pieces that are used in Ayurveda, and how we use roots and how we use flowers and how we use powders is a whole lesson in itself. I teach a cooking class just for people to learn that. Kumari, which is aloe vera, is, you can see the properties of it, and it's cooling, so it can be used for pitta, and it's sweet. The interesting thing that I've learned about Kumari means young woman. So lots of times in the old Ayurvedic text, what you'll see is you will see Kumari used as good for the skin, good for the reproductive organs, good for everything that has to do with a woman to keep her young and vital. And this is very true. It does have an effect on the reproductive system, but it has its biggest effect on the digestive system and the balance of Agni and hormones in the body. And the Vidari is the last one, and you can see the properties of it. It's very nourishing. It's kind of nourishing like ashwagandha is. It's not as much as a mind rasayana as ashwagandha is, but it's very nourishing to the body and very healing. The one thing Vidari does is it'll build more mass and more muscle on your body, just like ashwagandha will. So if you're a very lean person and you want to build some muscle, ashwagandha is not just for men. It can help you build that bulk on your body. And I think I'm finished. I'm not finished my slides, but it's 5 o'clock, so I'm going to have to finish. So we have breast techniques in Ayurveda that we do as part of abhyangas for your own health. Self-oiling your own breasts is really important to be able to keep the circulation moving in the breasts. And so I'd like to thank you for your time and allowing me to speak to you about women's health. If anybody's interested in me diving deeper into menopause or any symptoms, please let me know. And I'll see if Neelam and I can organize that, and we can have an in-depth dive into, one of the
Yes.
phases in life.
Erika, I think, each aspect, needs a separate webinar, just say like for PMS, for
Every page.
menopause, for younger women, for menstrual issues, because here we have some questions on fertility issues, we have on the menstruation. So can you just like briefly answer to 2 or 3,
I'll answer all the questions that I can. I don't have all the answers, but it can be very difficult if you have a very specific question to be able to answer it. Oh, sorry. To be able to answer it Ayurvedically, just because there's so many parameters, but I'll have a try at it. So please go ahead. Pardon me?
No, I didn't say anything. You go ahead. Yeah, I didn't say anything.
So do you want to, I can't get up the questions in my chat box.
Okay, so one is Arati Moon. She's asking that I'm a kapha dosha, and in menses, what kind of good or any specific herbs to deal with weight gain? So she's asking kapha, but she has herself decided she's kapha dosha, and whether her issues are kapha, we don't know.
But I mean, are you talking about edema?
Arati?
Yeah,
please.
Edema?
Sorry, yeah, because I noticed I have a lot of clots, all that during my periods time.
Right.
That's why I thought maybe I belong to the kapha dosha.
Yeah.
So I put on a lot of weight since a year. I'm not able to reduce, even though I'm doing regular exercise and following not eating heavy food.
Right.
So I just want to know, like, which kind of food is good. Like, salads is not good for a kapha dosha.
Well, it depends. See, the problem is that my answer will always be it depends. But I'll give you a general rundown. So kapha doshas tend to have a slower digestive system always. So if you have not been overweight all your life, then you're not probably a kapha dosha, but you have a kapha vikriti. You have an imbalance in that part of the body. So what probably needs to happen is that we need to improve your digestive system, your agni. And for that, I would have to know your bowel movements and, many different things. But if you have edema and we're not talking about weight gain, edema, you can have parsley and celery juice, and parsley is very good diuretic in your body. And there's lots of pieces like that. But the problem is if you've had weight gain over the last year, it's probably not just an issue that we need to deal with just with menopause. So I do online consultations. If you're interested, you can look at my website and talk to me, or find someone in your area to talk to. Just make sure you find someone that's classically trained.
Yes,
Erika, you did not mention your contact or information in your slide.
No, I don't have it. I'm bad at that. I'm at OkanaganAyurveda.com. I'll put it in the chat box, or maybe Neelam can.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Good luck.
Thank you.
I'll see. Oh, I opened the chats.
Okay. Then there is
I see there's one on osteoporosis. I'll go back and see if there's any other ones. Osteoporosis is a long-term, at least a long-term Vata condition that comes from multiple different avenues. So, and Basti is not your Basti is not your first line of defense when you have osteoporosis. I deal with a lot of people with osteoporosis. dealing with the stress in your life and adding good, there's some good calcium supplements that you can use Ayurvedically that aren't just meant to build the bones, but work in the calcium in the body. Another thing that you can do is sesame seeds are very good to help build the calcium. But it's usually a much deeper rooted issue, and it depends on if it's a more Vata or more Pitta condition, because it always encompasses Vata, which means it always encompasses the nervous system. So there kind of needs to be a mental and spiritual piece to it also. I hope that helped a little bit. Could you specifically how to take Shadowvaria? I can try, but Shadowvaria, because of its heavy nature, we need to be careful. If your digestion is not working very well, if you have Agni Mandya, then Shadowvaria, you need to be very careful with it because it'll just bog down and clog up your system even more. So if you have those kinds of issues, the first thing you want to do is get your digestive system working more optimally. And then when you take Shadowvaria, you can take it with half milk and half water, say a cup of milk and a cup of water, and put a tablespoon of Shadowvaria in there. And then put some of your favorite spices in there, like if you put cinnamon or nutmeg or spices or pipali or spices like tricketu, just a little tiny bit, it will help the heavy quality of the Shadowvaria, which is what you need, right? It's always a piece about how you can add those spices in to be able to mitigate the heaviness of that herb. It's a wonderful product, and it's so amazing for a female reproductive system, but just be careful about what your digestion is like when you start using it.
And sorry, can you just say that again? It's 1 tablespoon of powder in 1 cup of water and 1 cup of milk, and how many times a day, for example?
Well, lots of people take it at night, or some people take it in the morning. When people are going through menopause or after menopause, lots of times they take it in the morning, but it's a regulator of the hormones, so it'll work both ways. And when you put the cup of water and the cup of milk together with the Shadowvaria and a few little, sprinkle of spices, let it boil down a little bit.
Erika, there is a question on the fertility.
Sorry, is it working for PMS too, or just menopause?
Oh no, depending on the doshic makeup, it works for menopause, it works for regulating the hormonal system, regulating the periods. Just if you've got a lot of clotty stuff going on, Shadowvaria is not something you want to use though.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Are we done?
No, there is one question like on fertility issues and PCOS.
Okay, we'll just hang on a minute. Weight is, I see a few questions about weight here. Weight is a very, many times it's a tridoshic issue, and you need to deal with someone. I deal with a lot of people that, especially women, because there's a whole other system in the abdominal area, the abdominal fat, that has a life of its own that needs to be addressed in terms of the Agni in your body. Okay, I don't see the question on what?
On fertility.
Okay, just hold on, I'm looking for it.
It came right in the beginning.
Oh, right here. I love to know if Ayurveda has a perspective on seed cycling for fertility issues, or if there's a different dietary practice for things like PCOS. Yeah, there's a very different protocols depending on if the PCOS is more Vata provoking, or more of a Vata issue, more of a Pitta issue, or more of a Kapha issue. And I have a couple of clients like that right now. But you definitely need to know which of them they are, because as I said right at the beginning of the presentation, you really need to know specifically what doshas are out of balance. In every disease, it can be any dosha. It's not kind of like you see online where this is, I mean, there's some predominance of it, but there's also a very big mixture of that. And I'm sorry, but if you could tell me what seed cycling is, maybe I can help you. I don't know what that means.
Sure, I can speak to it a little bit. There is a practice in a lot of sort of more natural healthcare movements where they suggest for the first half of someone's cycle, on a daily basis, they consume a mix of pumpkin and flaxseed. And then for the second half of the cycle, they suggest a combination of sesame and sunflower seeds.
Right. No, that would not be something, a perspective that we would have in Ayurveda. I mean, you know, just the natural flow of the cycles in the first half of the cycle and the second half of the cycle in Ayurveda could not just be dealt with some seeds. And you know, that it goes back, Ayurveda always goes back to digestion, right? That how is the digestive system working and what you need in your diet. So sometimes those seeds may be too heavy and too provoking to something that you're looking to create, right? I mean, and you're looking for more unctuous, heavy, juicy things to happen when you have fertility issues. But in Ayurveda, there's more specific ways of dealing with that, which include, you know, all kinds of enemas if you need them. But in the beginning, it's more, the doctor I study with, we've done some very specific studies on infertility and have 3 or 4 different protocols for infertility that are based on, you know, eating specific diets, not just having one product. I hope that helped.
And
Very
especially the flax seeds and things like that, that's not very well accepted in Ayurveda as such, you know.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
in Ayurveda, the way I was taught, there's no food that's good or bad.
You know, no, definitely, but like the way, you know, people here eat flax seeds, that's what,
Yeah, I mean,
traditional, yeah.
I think it's traditional, you know. I mean, what I saw in India was an overconsumption of too much rice, right? So we all
Yes,
do
yeah.
something that's not working. But and it's the same piece I think that you're talking about. It's just about
No,
how
it's not it's a digestive part of that, you know. So flaxseed, it's widely eaten in northern India, but it's always ground flaxseed, you know, into
yeah,
food and
and I
stuff
mean,
like that. But
and
yeah,
flaxseed should always be ground fresh. You should never buy ground flaxseed, right?
yes, yeah.
If people don't know that, do not. Just grind it every time you want to use it. It goes rancid very quickly and has a very determinate effect on the mamsadhatu, or the medadhatu, the fat in your tissue. So you want to be grinding it when you're making it or when you're going to consume it.
Yes, Erica, this has been very wonderful presentation, very interesting, and you touched upon so many different aspects, you know, that like took out the disease part, you know, out of the natural cycle of a woman. So, you know, like here, how in the West, you know, everything is PMS is a disease and menstrual, you know, but like, so you have taken all that and, you know, explaining how different discomforts or those kind of things, they are related to digestion, and digestion, how it links, you know, to the women's cycles. That is very interesting, and maybe next time we can go more in detail. Definitely, let's do another next month or so.
Yeah.
Another session.
Yes,
So
anybody
yes,
has specific requests, I'm always open to spreading the word of Ayurveda to everyone.
that's what we do.
That's right.
And so please become a member of Ayurveda Association, become an enthusiast member. If you are not a practitioner, if you are Ayurvedic practitioner, become a practitioner member. We will help give you opportunity to promote your knowledge and share it with our community. If you're alternative medicine practitioner, please, and you incorporate Ayurveda in your practice, please let us know. We will provide, we will feature you on our website and your practice and the work what you do. And of course, anybody with Ayurveda business, we can promote your business. So become our corporate members. So we need your support, and your membership gives us financial support to bring programs like this. Every program that we promote, what we promote, or whether we present and through different social media, it costs us fund. We need funds for that. So we need your financial support in becoming a member of Ayurveda Association of Canada. So we look forward to seeing you again on our
Can I just say
regular
one?
webinars. Sure. Go ahead.
Someone just asked where the link for the recording will be. Within the next week, it'll be on our YouTube channel. Just like all the other webinars that we've done are on there right now.
Yes.
Within
So
the
please check our Facebook and social media and YouTube channel, subscribe our YouTube channel and like us on your social media. And we need your support to promote Ayurveda in North America, in Canada.
Yes. And thank you very much. You guys were awesome. Thank you for your time. Your time, everyone's time is valuable.
Thank
So
you.
have a great evening. Take care of yourselves and see you soon. Bye. Namaste.
Namaste.
Oh, now I need to.